Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is June 30, 2022, and today we're going to talk about the CPUSA a little bit. This morning, they made a tweet that went viral, and then they quickly deleted it and then replaced it with a tweet that really wasn't that much better. Still reflected basically the same thought process that they've been putting out for years, and which a lot of their membership says that they don't agree with. So it's kind of a question of why is this organization, which presents itself as the Communist Party of the United States, consistently representing such an opportunist line with regard to the Democratic Party. We did a video about this almost 2 years ago, back in September, October 2020, before the elections that year, when CPUSA was running articles like this one, Call to Action, Vote Against Fascism. I mean, absurd. So, and people would point out the Dimitrov quote that's shown in the picture there. Fascism is the power of finance capital itself. Okay, great. Who funds and controls the Democratic Party? Right. Same people that control and fund the Republican Party. Now, there are differences between these parties. There are some contradictions within the ruling class of the United States, but on every major aspect of running, maintaining, and expanding the U.S. empire and the domestic police state, they collaborate. So the Democrats are a fascist collaborating party to whatever extent that we want to call what's happening in the United States fascism, which I think is fair. I think that's a reasonable assessment of what's going on in the United States. Well, going back to Dimitrov, who we have an audiobook of, actually a couple of audiobooks of, here on the channel, talking specifically about what the Comintern was doing with fascism back in the 1930s. The idea was that in some places the proletariat would align with the bourgeoisie in order to fight fascism, but that this depended on the state of development of the proletariat. And if you read through Dimitrov, he lays out how it was policy at that time that in the more advanced countries, the proletariat was sufficiently developed where it didn't need that kind of alliance with the bourgeoisie, whereas in more backward countries, for example, Spain, they used as an example, the proletariat was not as well developed. So you needed more of a popular front where there was class collaboration against fascism, at least where the other classes were anti-fascist and were actually going to stick to that alliance. In other words, they wanted more civil libertarian bourgeois government versus the more tyrannical and terroristic fascist forms of bourgeois government. Now, we know that fascism is basically capitalism in crisis, particularly in danger of revolution. That's when the capitalist class turns more to fascism to try to keep capitalism together and to repel any kind of a threat of a social revolution. Now, the question then presents itself, is the Democratic Party an anti-fascist party? The answer is absolutely not. Anything that they say in this regard is just for show. For example, they will talk about the January 6th incident at the U.S. Capitol, and that's concerning. Basically, any fascist, name a fascist group, Three Percenters, Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, on and on down the line. They all had representatives there at this thing. Like, that's who was doing that. It's a concerning thing. But like Roe v. Wade, also a concerning thing, what are the Democrats actually doing about it beyond fundraising? Are they truly opposing the right? I mean, I've said many times on the channel, if the Democrats wanted to, well, first of all, if they were an independent force, in other words, not completely controlled by big money interests, but if they're an independent force, we're going to come back to the big money interests and why this isn't happening. That is the reason why. But so if the Democrats were an independent political force and they really wanted to crush the Republicans and send them into the dustbin of history, all they would have to do is ally with the left, run on a campaign of broad popular reforms, and the Republicans would be reduced to a regional party with no sway in national politics. But they don't do that. What happens instead is the political tension stays between the Democrats and the Republicans, always fighting for their life, and the Democrats, in fact, spend more energy opposing the left, keeping us out of the spotlight at all. Now, again, why is this? Well, the same people basically fund the same class and a lot of the same actual people, organizations, institutions, corporations, etc., fund both parties. Why? Because by doing that, They keep the political discussion and all the attention between basically the center right and the far right. And in keeping it there, they prevent the left from ever gaining a foothold, and it reduces the danger to capitalism, their system. That is the primary thing they're looking to protect, is the class rule of the capitalists. Because what happens if the Republicans get shattered and swept up into the dustbin of history? Then the former allies, the left and the Democrats, who had combined to fight against the Republicans, become competitors. And then what happens? Will the left win, or will the Democrats win? Now, the capitalists don't control the left. So if the left wins, the capitalists completely lose control of the system, and you may have a situation that leads to revolution and the abolition of capitalism. So if you're a big money interest that's controlling the Democratic Party through the money, then why would you want that? You wouldn't ever want that. What you want is two enemies of the left, not one. And you want one of them to pretend to sort of be the left. And that's been the role of the Democrats for a long time. Like, oh, we're the adults in the room. We're the ones who will actually represent, quote, left positions. In fact, they will represent about 5% of the topics that we actually discuss and the demands that we actually make on the left. And then the entire rest of the platform is just corporate shit. So in the US, you have two major parties, both controlled by big money. One of them, the Republicans, is increasingly becoming openly a white nationalist party. Obviously, that's not good for the working class. And then the other party just fundraises off of fear of that situation without doing anything real about it. So let's be clear. Socialists don't support Trump either. That's not a good situation. But no amount of voting Democrat is going to get us out of the crisis that capitalism is having, or their increasingly panicked, fascistic responses to it. There are things that we can do, but breaking with the Democratic Party is step number one so that we can organize independently for real class struggle. Now, you can run candidates in whatever races you think that you might be able to gain a foothold in, and especially if this is coordinated on a nationwide level, you may be able to make some momentum as whatever kind of left coalition, the various left parties, if they were to combine, which I think would be a smart thing, could come up with. And thereby you can make this a national movement. Would have been really easy if Bernie Sanders had done this and directed tens of millions of people into such a movement. Instead, he fed them into the Democratic Party like the sheepdog that he is. And so we're left trying to basically have another Bernie moment, but outside the Democratic Party without any sort of, quote, celebrity help. Now, it can be done on a purely grassroots basis. However, when you already have people rallying by the tens of thousands in stadiums per city, towards a message of transformation of the system, that would be a great jumping off point for just feeding all those people into an independent movement where we can actually be productive rather than into the iron clutches of a big capital controlled party like the Democrats. That to me is the next step. We had Occupy Wall Street, which was a very, loosey-goosey, like everybody shows up at a park. But real demands came out of it. There was a real dialogue that came out of it. It was a few years after the 2008 global financial meltdown, and people started talking about capitalism again. They started talking about foreclosures and student debt and Medicare for all and criminal justice reform and imperialism, and all that started happening. And that was a good step forward for the US left. I know because I saw the US left before this point, and it was a step forward. Then that message spreads. Bernie Sanders comes along, picks up on it, and amplifies it tremendously. Also helps to articulate it, gets it onto cable news. This is becoming more and more, of a household discussion. And it gets fed into the Democrats. Well, what have the Democrats done? What have you heard about any of the issues raised by Occupy and Bernie and generally the demands that people have for, basic major reforms that many people can agree on? Well, it's been silenced because that's the role of the Democratic Party. So again, we have to do that, but pull it back out of the Democratic Party and then do it independently on our own without the capital interference. And, then the organizations that we build in that process, not being controlled by capital, can become general organizing hubs, not just for running candidates, but for all kinds of class struggle, the many-faceted struggle that is, effective revolutionary buildup. So CPUSA, in making this tweet, and again, this has been their messaging for quite a while now, is it in line with even what CPUSA's membership wants? What I hear is consistently no. You can find some people who say, like, yes, I support this line, but that's no different really from DSA. And I have suggested to many people that if it's the only thing going on in your area, join DSA. However, always with the caveat that if you get in there, you've got to argue against endorsing Democrats whenever that issue comes up. I understand that in a lot of areas, they're doing real work, non-electoral work. They're doing real organizing. They're involved in this campaign or that campaign that is, non-electoral in nature. That's great. Do that if that's what you can. You can meet other people and network, etc. Maybe some other project will come out of that, a year or two down the line. That's what we need to see. People engaging in struggle, really giving it their all and figuring out these lessons. That's how mass movement and a mass struggle generates a vanguard. Okay, it's not just sitting around and reading books. It's, the vanguard is the most class-conscious detachment of the struggling masses. But if the masses aren't struggling, it doesn't generate a vanguard. And then your vanguard just winds up being sort of this armchair detachment. That's no good. So we want to encourage mass struggle, like wherever, workers are going to spontaneously rise up here and there, and they're going to learn lessons. And then, we who do study the history want to advise and, try to direct that in constructive ways. The masses are either going to accept or reject those lines of advice based on, what they think. And hopefully there's, a useful back and forth here that results in actual revolutionary momentum. Now, is in 2022 continuing to insist that, voting against fascism, is this the kind of advice we want to be giving people? Again, I say no, the exact opposite. I mean, vote if you want, but we don't vote for bourgeois parties. That's the idea, unless you have some super specific reason behind it and, not just sort of wanton, lazy, hopeless opportunism. But again, about the membership of CPUSA versus the leadership of CPUSA who keeps doing this stuff, the majority of people that I talk to don't agree with this, and I've attacked CPUSA in the past over this specific topic, and I backed off for a while because I understand that they got a big membership boost and their numbers have gone up. And I've said before in live streams, like, I'm going to go hands off and let them do what they're doing because give them time to sort of change the party and see what they can do. But also this needs to be called out and, spotlighted when it comes up. Usually what I hear from people in CPUSA who tell me that they're CPUSA members is my local club doesn't think this way at all. Or maybe there's a few people who think that working with the Democrats is okay. I mean, let alone buying into this entire line that the Democrats are anti-fascist in any meaningful way, et cetera, et cetera. Most of them are like, not a single person in my club, or maybe one or two, thinks this way, and we don't know why the leadership says this kind of stuff. Well, what kind of organization is it where you have leadership that's so out of step with the membership, and specifically in this kind of opportunist way? It's been going on for a long time, too. Like, a lot of people highlight co-chair Joe Sims as, like, sort of just the picture of your basic, like, CNN-addicted boomer who regurgitates all this pro-Democrat stuff. I personally have watched some of the live streams a couple of years ago before the last election, and I thought it was indistinguishable from a Democratic Party live stream, except that somehow even fewer people were watching it. So again, I'm not trying to just dogpile here. I know that a lot of new people have joined CPUSA, a lot of people that I communicate with regularly here through the channel. And I know that you're good people who believe a lot of the right stuff. You're sincere Marxists and you're trying to join CPUSA to do the right thing. But what's going on with this organization? What's going on with this party? So the article that they actually linked to here, the Trump wanted to march to the Capitol and lead the coup attempt directly, aide testifies. It's about January 6th. It's not even the worst article, but this tweet that's attached to it, that's promoting it, is that's not really what this is about in the first place. And again, it's reflective of a long trend. So rather than reading the People's World article about the January 6th thing, which again, I agree, January 6th, concerning the rising fascist movement, MAGA, is deeply concerning. They built off of the Tea Party thing from 10 years ago, and the Tea Party itself was sort of the new face of the Republican Party after Bush and Cheney in the 2000s basically wore out all the goodwill, trashed the name, if you will, of the country club wing of the Republican Party. And so they brought these pseudo-populist, right-wing populist, proto-fascist, and fascist, coalition, the Tea Party. But it's not like they invented these people for the Tea Party. They just gave them more of a platform and more money. Prior to that, who were they? They were the John Birch Society. They were the Sovereign Citizen Movement. They were libertarians. They were all the sort of crypto-fash crazies that have been in the woodwork of the U.S. political landscape for a long time. You saw this type of, grassroots rollout under the Reagan-Bush years back in the 80s when they came hard at the U.S. people with the neoliberal agenda. The Republicans really didn't have the numbers. The country was in much more of like a left liberal, social democratic headspace at that point. Neoliberalism and Reagan's, quote, vision, of course it was corporate America's vision, Reagan was just a spokesman, that was a big turning point. So they really didn't have the numbers. How did they fill out the ranks? Well, they got the evangelicals in and the moral majority and all the kind of conservative religious people. So they've been building this sort of proto-fascist movement for a long time, the rabid anti-communists and all that kind of stuff. And the Republicans have given them center stage, a lot of money. It's kind of taken on a life of its own. You see some elements in the Republican and the Democratic parties who have the same basic, hyper-capitalist interests at heart. They don't like their style. They don't like the particular, way that MAGA is going about it. But don't confuse that sort of squawking, especially when that's all it is talk, for some kind of actual anti-fascist action. Remember, at any time they could ally with the left and stamp all this out if they really wanted to. That's not really what they want. But anyway, that's how we're here. That's how Trump happened. And MAGA is now capable of generating new leaders. Like, you can, at this point, send Trump to jail, whatever the Democrats keep talking about. MAGA is its own force, and it is, probably capable of autonomous action at this point. Now, it does still need the money. That said, it has a lot of wealthy fans, so who knows? But keeping on the CPUSA thing and how this isn't just about Joe Sims, but kind of a trend within the party, let's turn to a Gawker article. This is an interview by Hamilton Nolan with John Bachtel, the national chair of CPUSA at the time, which was 2015. I think that you'll see that this predates Joe Sims. Thanks, by the way, to Comrade Renee on Twitter for pointing some of this out. So, the United States of America has a communist party. John Bachtel is its national chairman. We spoke to him about American politics, the mistakes of the Soviets, and communism's, quote, branding problem. Bachtel grew up in Ohio, with parents active in the civil rights and anti-war movement. He became interested in communism in college and has been a member of the party since 1977. All the while, he's been involved in political campaigns as well. We met him last week at the Communist Party USA's headquarters on 23rd Street in Manhattan to hear what modern American communism is all about. It's not your daddy's communism. Gawker: your involvement in electoral campaigns is mainly organizing for progressive Democrats? This is the first question. John Bachtel: yes. Mainly progressive Democrats and independents at every level, whether it be city council, state rep, Senate, presidential. I was really active in both Obama campaigns. Actually, I was his precinct captain for his Senate campaign in Illinois. You know what? I'm not going to read this article anymore. I'll give the link. You can read the article. I'm not going to do it in this video. I've been talking for long enough, and frankly, it's roasting in the room where I'm recording this. So, yeah, maybe in a live stream or something like that, I'll finish it out. But I think that this video is long enough already. I just wanted to say something about this because, again, I'm trying to, comment on what's going on within the general left everything from, DSA, including its right wing that still supports the Democratic Party, whether it's the Greens, PSL, like commentary on whatever is noteworthy. But, when it comes to the Communist Party of the United States, as in the real one, the original one, the correct one, etc., all the things that are implied by the Communist Party of the United States. I mean, really, where is this supposed to get us? And why? I mean, I've heard from commenters who say things like, my local club isn't like this, we do other stuff, and, ignore the fact, basically, that the leadership is a bunch of libs. Well, but no, because if your organization is generating liberal opportunist leadership in the Communist Party, you clearly have some faulty processes. And what is going on exactly? We'll continue this in future videos. In the meantime, what do you think? Leave questions and comments below. We'll continue the discussion in the comments section as always. And otherwise, thanks for listening. Thanks to the current patrons also, whose names are on the screen. We don't run ads on this channel, so the patron support is hugely important. Thank you very much to all the patrons. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialismforall. You can sign up for as little as $2 a month or more, whatever you see fit. Every donation is encouraging. They're also materially helpful, so the more the merrier. And they have actually objectively allowed me to spend more time on this than I would have been able to do otherwise. So if you like this content, thank a patron. Also, once the content has been produced and uploaded, engagement counts, liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting, even if it's thanks or good video. Spread this around, make it easier for people to stumble across. The channel has been growing a lot, which is great. We want to keep it growing, and we want to be able, as capitalism goes into crisis and people start to wonder, hey, how do I fight back? How do I struggle effectively? We want to put tools like these in their hands for understanding current conditions, capitalism versus socialism, the revolutionary process, building socialism, and so on and so on. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.